Welcome to the Sizer online tutorial. In this tutorial, we will demonstrate multiple features available in the load input for beam mode and column mode. Entering loads in Sizer is easy to do. There is virtually no NBC load type and distribution that cannot be modeled in Sizer. Let's look at the beam supports area loads from continuous joists. Normally, if you use span tables, or even Sizer, the calculation of a beam span is assumed to be based on the tributary length of joists, assuming the joists on each side of the beam are simple spans, that is, discontinuous joists resting on the beam. This would mean that if each joist was 12 feet long, the tributary length would be 6 feet from each joist, and the line load of the beam would be based on the total 12 feet times the area load. But if the joists are continuous over the span, there is actually an increase in the amount of load the beam has imposed on it, depending on the difference of joist length from each side of the beam. Sizer settings allows you to specify that joists are continuous over spans, and calculates the increased load on the beam. In other words, when this feature is checked, and an area load A and a tributary width S are entered, the line load used in the Sizer analysis to compute stresses is W is equal to A times S times the percentage of the tributary area load that goes to the center support. When it is not checked, the line load is area load times the tributary width. Whether this option is enabled or not, it will ultimately have an effect on the shear, moment, and deflection values applied to the beam. The feature has two options, either two span or other. The default condition is that the beam supports two equal spans, for which the percentage of load on the center beam you are designing is 125. If two span is selected, the software allows you to enter a ratio of the two spans the beam is supporting. By default, the two spans are considered as equal. Although, if one of the two spans of the beam you are designing is 3 meters long and the other is 1.5 meters, you could enter 1.5 as the ratio, which will change the percentage of load the beam will see from 125% to 129.2%. This percentage is based on engineering mechanics, and I will show you a familiar looking diagram to reiterate what I am talking about in a few seconds. When other is selected, Sizer gives you the option to input whatever percentage of load you want, which is useful if your beam is supporting a floor system that consists of cases with more than two spans. The input percentage is ultimately up to you. Here is what I meant by the familiar looking diagram. This one is from AWC's beam design formulas with shear and moment diagrams. Notice the reaction R2 is 10 divided by 8 WL, which is equal to 1.25 WL, appropriate for the two equal spans. Here is another very handy option. Live and snow loads come directly from exterior surface. This section becomes available when both live and snow loads are applied to a member. To comply with NBCC 4.1.5.5 stating that roofs shall be designed for either the uniform live loads or snow and rain loads. Therefore, this option allows you to create a set of load combinations without live and snow loads in the same combination. This is used to model a member supporting a surface such as a roof terrace or parking area that can be expected to have direct live and snow loading. When the setting is checked, the program will omit those combinations that have both live and snow loads. If the program would ordinarily create combinations with the L plus S together but not separately, then the S only or L only combination is created. Since the total factor load is lower when enabling the feature, it will have an effect on the shear and moment force applied to the beam, as well as its total deflection. Therefore, the required resistance will also be lower, so the beam and bearing properties could be designed differently as well. When the checkbox Add Concentrated Live Load is checked, the program automatically adds a concentrated live load to the list. You can modify the magnitude of the concentrated live load and the width over which it is applied. Note that if this is the first load you place on the member, you will not be able to add other loads. Load the member with other loads first, and then check the Add Concentrated Live Load option. This section is only accessible when designing with floor and roof joists. As per NBC Clause 4.1.5.9, stating the following: the default magnitude in the software for floor and roof joists are respectively 9 kN and 1.3 kN over a loaded area of 750 by 750 mm. When this option is applied to a beam, the program verifies all of the load combinations it ordinarily does, plus those with the concentrated live load. The extra combinations are comprised of the move-in concentrated live load combined with the other live loads present on the joist. Sizer determines the worst case for shear, bending, and deflection from all load combinations when performing the analysis. It will not perform separate analysis for concentrated and non-concentrated situations. You must run two separate designs for this. Enter point load as UDL. This setting allows you to specify point loads applied to joists by entering the load dimensions on the assumption that the load comes from a uniformly loaded wall. It is only available when designing with the floor or roof joist type. The purpose of this feature is to allow you to easily adjust the floor joist spacing without recalculating the point load. For example, if I have a joist system where the joists are spaced at 12 inch on center and I want to check a 500 pounds point load applied to each joist, perhaps due to a wall line load above, the point UDL is also 500 PLF. But then, if I wanted to see what happens if I increase the joist spacing to 24 inch on center, I would also want the point load to be adjusted to 1000 PLF. Selecting this load entry option makes the change automatically. This setting is saved to the member file on a load-by-load basis, so it is possible to enter some point loads as UDLs and some as point loads. The word point UDL appears in the load list of these loads. When it comes to self-weight, the software gives you the option to either automatically generate the weight of the members in the load analysis or to manually input it as a load. As well, Sizer has options when specifying the importance category. If your snow loads were developed based on Part 9 snow loads, you can adjust the importance category to match this so that the appropriate factors are applied. The sustained live type of loads enables this option here, which you can select whether the load is due to the equipment or liquids in tank, which will affect the coefficients from the load combinations. The load input in column mode is similar to beam mode, with a few exceptions. First, lateral loads can be applied to either the width or the depth of the columns or studs. Secondly, you can add axial loads. If you add a negative axial load, Sizer will treat the load as a tension force. The axial loads can be applied eccentrically. By default, each axial load will be automatically placed with an eccentricity of 1/6 of the depth of the member applied to all loads. You can turn this off if you desire. One restriction is that the eccentricity is analyzed about only one load face of the column, with the width or depth.